Before humanity began its quest to unite the Alpha and Beta quadrants into the United Federation of Planets, Starfleet made a number of technological breakthroughs that would define its trek to the stars for years to come. Hello and welcome to Trek Facts, a web series that takes a fun and fast look at the fundamentals of Star Trek. In today's episode, we're taking a look at some of the early technology developed by Starfleet Command. I hope you enjoy. When Zefram Cochrane made his first historic warp flight on April 5, 2063 at 10 a.m., humanity had no idea how that single event would come to redefine them and eventually countless other species throughout the Milky Way galaxy. And shortly after the flight, first contact with the Vulcan species would cause humanity to come together as one and create a Starfleet, an organization dedicated to taking humanity to the stars. Besides having to design and create starships to ferry humanity from star system to star system, Starfleet also had to create a warp drive system capable of achieving this goal. The first warp drive, called the Warp 2 engine, given its inability to exceed the speed of warp factor 2, was in service by the early 22nd century. Though considered an amazing accomplishment for Starfleet, this engine system, which could allow a ship to travel 8 times the speed of light at a maximum, was just too slow to be practical for exploring other star systems in a reasonable amount of time. And so, Starfleet scientists began the daunting task of breaking what was known as the Warp 2 barrier. It was not until the year 2143 that Starfleet broke the Warp 2 barrier. Commanders A.G. Robinson and Jonathan Archer demonstrated this advanced warp engine in the second NX-class prototype, the NX Beta, by holding the ship steady at a warp of warp factor 2.5. With this breakthrough, it became possible to upgrade older starships, such as the Y-class freighter, with a Warp 3 engine. But Starfleet decided to set itself a goal: to create a functioning Warp 5 engine system to be included in its first true exploration starship, the NX class. This Warp 5 engine was officially called a gravimetric field displacement manifold, and would allow a starship to achieve the speeds necessary to allow humans to explore the stars. When originally launched, the NX-01, named Enterprise, was capable of only maintaining warp factor 5 for 53 minutes. This speed was first tested in 2152, but by 2153, warp 5 had become a sustainable cruising velocity that could be maintained for long periods of time. The speed of warp 5 corresponding roughly to the velocity of 200 times the speed of light. In the year 2154, breakthroughs in plasma injector technology allowed the NX-01 to achieve and sustain a speed of warp factor 5.06, and a speed of warp factor 5.2 could now be achieved and held for short periods of time. Starfleet would continue to develop warp technology, writing and rewriting warp scales as their knowledge of warp speeds and the universe increased. But the Warp 5 engine system was truly one of the biggest breakthroughs of Starfleet, and would become its staple engine system for years to come. The first human-made transporter was invented in the early 2120s by Emery Erickson, who subsequently became revered as the father of the transporter. Erickson often spoke about his first transporter experience, to which he had this to say about it.
That original transporter took a full minute and a half to cycle through. Felt like a year. You could actually feel yourself being taken apart, put back together.
Though the transporter would eventually become an everyday device aboard starships, the early models were frowned upon, having lost several brave men and women during initial testing. When the first biomatter-approved transporter became available in 2151, most of humanity still preferred the longer shuttle flights, rather than trusting this new technology.
I heard this platform's been approved for biotransport. I presume you mean fruits and vegetables.
I mean armory officers and helmsmen.
Don't think I'm quite ready to have my molecules compressed into a data stream.
However, as time went on, the usefulness and general reliability of the transporter would sway opinion, and eventually place the transporter ahead of the more traditional methods of transport. As Starfleet continued its exploration of space, dependence on the transporter grew significantly. Transporters could simplify away missions considerably by eliminating the time required to travel by shuttlecraft, and in case of emergencies, medical or otherwise, the time saved could mean the difference between life or death for a crewman. These early versions of the transporter, though, were not without their faults and malfunctions. In fact, during the early missions of the NX-01 Enterprise, the transporters would see Ensign Sato, the communications officer aboard the ship, experiencing several events while actually only being 8 seconds within the transporter buffer. And during transport, while the NX-01 was attempting to stop the launch of the Earth-destroying superweapon created by the Xindi, a Mako officer would suffer severe injuries leading to his death, even though he had already mostly dematerialized. Though the transporter did have its downsides, as previously stated, it also became crucial in several missions, and in turn saved many lives. It's no wonder that this piece of technology is almost as revered as warp drive itself, for propelling Starfleet forward into the future. A phase-modulated directed energy weapon, the phase cannon was a type of particle weapon which served as the precursor to the phaser weapons of the 23rd and 24th centuries. These cannons were first introduced by Starfleet in the mid-22nd century, designed as the primary defense of the NX-class starships, and serving as a supplement for the spatial torpedo system. The first NX-class vessel to test and actively use phase cannons in battle was the Enterprise NX-01. The phase cannon was rated for a maximum output of 500 gigajoules. The cannons for the NX-class starship were mounted on retractable turrets which extended from the ship's hull, when deployed and rotated as they targeted objects. Like phase pistols, phase cannons emitted a concentrated beam of energy that could be set at different yields. The initial testing of the Enterprise's phase cannons was conducted in 2151 on an asteroid. The first shot was so powerful that it formed a new crater within said asteroid, and overloaded the phase modulators and blew out relays across C and D decks of the NX-01. Following this, it was determined that the blast yield of the shot was 10 times that of what was expected. The crew of the starship later used this to their advantage, to defend themselves against a mysterious alien species that were attacking them, and subsequently solved the overload problem by directing the plasma recoil into the gravity platings on Deck C and D. During the Xindi crisis of 2153, the phase cannons would become a crucial part of the Enterprise's weapons complement. Though primarily thought of as a fighting weapon, many times the phase cannons would be used in an unconventional sense, such as burning off nucleogenic particles that had accumulated on the ship's hull, preventing the launch of the starship's shuttle pods. Though the Enterprise herself was unable to prevent the launch of the Xindi superweapon, its epic battle to attempt to destroy it is well documented and revered by Starfleet officers. The battered and damaged ship held her ground and was prepared to fight to the bitter end, until the Xindi weapon disappeared into a subspace portal on its way to Earth. Leading an away team to the superweapon, Captain Archer was able to defeat and destroy the weapon, while also cementing future relations with the Xindi species. And the NX-01 was able to destroy the Sphere Builders network that was attempting to reconfigure space in the Milky Way galaxy as a route for their invasion. Without this early type of weapon, it's clear Starfleet's dream of exploring the cosmos would have been halted shortly after it began. So the importance of phase cannons cannot be overstated. Though many other technologies would see their invention and implementations over Starfleet's early years, such as photonic torpedoes and force fields, these three technological innovations were disputedly the most important of Starfleet vessels, leading Starfleet to continually improve and refine these technologies for future generations, making Starfleet, and after the creation of the United Federation of Planets, a force to be reckoned with and respected throughout the Alpha and Beta quadrants.